In
I
this
think.
episode, we started doing the thing that we have talked about for about 8 years.
Yes, that's it. That's the sound bite. That's the sound bite. So, I think and then we'll go right into, "I'm out, this is Lalie,
Yeah,
and we're doing
sounds
this
good.
thing."
Well, that's something I think about a lot with writing and with podcasting is, like, people are out here saying, like, heinous stuff. Like, we might be having a podcast, but at least we're not Andrew Tate. I haven't human trafficked anybody, and I don't talk to other people about how to do it. So if I sound like an idiot on the internet, who really gives a shit?
Right, right.
It's benign.
Human trafficking is a crime,
It's
and
wrong.
it's wrong. Uh, and also, January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. The
Mm,
11th is Wear Blue Day,
okay,
in human trafficking awareness. So that's the 11th is Thursday.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good
Um,
to know. I'll be
well,
wearing brown.
brown. If you can put like a blue hair tie on. No, it's probably not in regs.
No.
Um, but and I think it was interesting. I was getting some speakers together for the symposium that we're having, and human trafficking. We talk about Andrew Tate and like him. That's for sex, but like human trafficking is used a lot for
Agriculture.
agriculture and other labor jobs and stuff. And so
Mhm.
we were getting speakers, and they were like talking about adult human trafficking and children human trafficking, and then someone brought up like, have you looked at the agricultural stuff, especially being in mid to southern Georgia where we have a lot of
Yes.
agriculture. Um,
Florida.
yeah.
Bad in Florida. I-75.
hmm Well, I think it's interesting
Tomatoes.
because tomatoes very important. Tomatoes are very important to
Well,
our.
I did a project on this in high school because you were doing the human trafficking in college
At that
at the
point, yeah.
time, and so
Mhm.
I was interested in it. So when we did the project, I picked human trafficking, and I wrote a little play about a Florida farmer that was human trafficking people, or it was really about the people getting human trafficked. I'm so sorry. Please continue your thought.
No, I'm that's just funny how like I don't remember. Anyway, I mean, do you hear that?
Is that a cat? Who else would it be?
Oh, it is. It is a cat.
Exactly. Well, yeah.
So,
Also, the human trafficking one thing, it's interesting because, like, in my mind, human trafficking is like what got you more into graphic design. I don't know if that's
yeah.
accurate, but I feel like that
Yes.
kind of set you on the career path that you're on currently. So it's
I,
interesting. Life comes full circle like that
wow.
sometimes.
It is really interesting. Um and it's funny because that's the advice that I give any young person asking
Hmm.
me for advice. And that's the advice I give anyone asking me for advice, not just young
Yes.
people. What's really interesting being essentially I've only been in the gig economy.
Hmm.
And so I think it's really interesting talking to people older than us
Hmm.
who are feeling the squeeze.
Hmm.
And not that, and you and I have talked about this a lot, like not that everything we do has to be monetized,
Hmm.
but there's things about the gig economy that, or always having a side gig that has made me more resilient.
Oh
And it may
yeah.
just be that I'm just wild and I have to always have something,
Yeah.
but I think that it's really important to tell people all you have to do is say your next yes. If there's something that
Hmm.
interests you, that you want to be involved in, say yes. Even if you don't have the skill, if you have close to the skill, you
Hmm.
can learn it if you apply yourself,
Yes.
and sometimes having the passion for it and just saying yes is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, especially at workplaces. Like, a lot of
Mhm.
times people will be like, "Do you know how to do this?" And I'm like, "I might say no, but don't let that deter you from allowing me to try."
Right?
Um, because I want to have a shot at it. And I also think being a millennial, it's like generationally, I have a lot more resilience to periods of unemployment because
Yeah.
they've just been a facet of my life more than other
Yeah.
so that's part of why the gig economy, it's like, I'm not as stressed out by being unemployed because I will find something to do.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's just kind of sad to think about, but it's like I don't have a job with pension, so
Right. Like, it is something as I'm in my late 30s now, I guess, mid to late 30s, where it's like, okay, so I definitely want to plan ahead for my future, but, like, is there a world, for me to
where I
plan ahead
retire,
to?
yeah,
Right. Is there a world that I retire? Is there a world that exists?
yeah,
And it's in, talking, with the beginning, we talked a little bit about, like, nihilism, like,
hmm
w it is so hard to plan ahead when you don't know if the next month is gonna be okay.
yeah, and we're definitely not alone in feeling like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and my own Sophie. For my own sanity, I'm probably gonna work until I die just because, like, if I don't have a structure, I'm like a deep sea fish rising to the surface and just falling apart.
Right.
But that being said, I also like even though I do technically have a job with like retirement options now, I don't really trust it. Like
Right.
I do
Right.
it because it's what I'm supposed to do, but I don't really expect that I will ever see the fruits of that. Like,
Mhm.
I think something cataclysmic might happen, or thank you for the cough drops. Uh, I think something cataclysmic might happen, or, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen
Right.
in this world. Now,
Right.
I I can work as hard as I can to make a better outcome. But then I also have to convince other people that putting some effort in is not fruitless, but then
Mm.
also I feel like it is a lot of the time. Because it's it's like it's hard out here to just keep on trying.
It's really hard to keep on track. Well, that's where Good Creatures came from in the first place,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Yes.
It was early 2020, or
Mhm.
maybe end of 2019. It might have even been before COVID,
Mhm.
where we both kind of had this, like, feeling of malaise, you specifically,
Mhm.
where it was like, um, we know so much or we know so little.
Mhm.
How do we make a world that we want to live in happen? Is that
Right.
even possible? Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know if you and I talked about what you really wanted Good Creatures to be at that point. Like,
Well, so it was kind of a journey for me after 2016 or so. So obviously, like I'm a sexual assault survivor, and so the election surrounding Donald Trump was really hard for me. And then there was what what when was Brock Turner?
oh, um,
That was, let's see, looking it up. 2016. Yes, that was March
okay, so same time.
2016.
Okay.
So I was in therapy and I was having a hard time living in a world which felt like not only unsafe to me as an assault survivor, but um that so many people didn't give a crap about it. That people would they cared more these about Trump and Turner's, lives and how they're going to turn out than about assault.
Mhm.
And in therapy, my therapist and I talked a lot about okay, it seems like your relationship to the news right now is not that helpful
Mm,
to you from like a mental health standpoint. And what would it feel like if you step back from consuming what's happening and look for some small way that you could get involved?
mm, mhm,
And so I started trying to think about politics more like that, not that like not even getting directly involved in politics as such, but finding um ways that could be involved and just make a small step forward and and kind of like when I saw stuff happening in the news be like, well, I'm doing my best. I have something that I'm working on and I'm going to focus on that. And that's how I got involved eventually with I volunteered with Run for Something for a little bit, like doing this candidate screening. But then I also got more interested in researching like if I want to get involved, I don't even know where to start half the time. And most of my friends don't either, short of actually running for office.
Mhm.
Um sorry. I feel like that cough drop is gonna be distracting in the long run.
I assumed it
um
was just too spicy.
um but yeah, so the idea of good creatures was okay, a lot of people feel really powerless,
Mm,
and how can you connect them to understanding the situations, like the environment they live in a way that is empowering? Because
mm,
in a democracy, inherently you do have options for making changes. And that's actually something I've been loving about my social work classes. Not just about this internal work thing, like, are you good? Like, there's something in you that's broken and must be healed.
mm.
And then all of a sudden, your life is gonna be easy and you're not gonna give a crap about, like, you'll just be like a Zen master that's floating through the world. And it's like, oh, well, if I, like, if I wanted to be happy, I shouldn't have had expectations that anything would have been better at all. No, that's bullshit. Like,
Right.
you're not the only broken one here.
Mhm.
This If you make changes to your environment, then that will actually make you feel better in the long run than if you were just constantly doing inner work to no effect on your exterior circumstances.
Right.
Um, but which also for me, like leaving my job at G2, that made me so stressed out and
Mm,
so just like constantly burned out. There was a point I reached at which, okay, no matter how much therapy I go to, this job is gonna make me feel sick and sad.
mm.
I have to get a
Yeah.
different job. And that was part of why I made the changes that I did in my life at the time. But this was all like around this, like 2016, 2018 time period where it was like I was pivoting more from, okay, I was a traumatized person. I'm not as much anymore. Now I'm realizing the stuff around me is really broken, and that's why I'm so sad and stressed out. But
Yeah.
I'm too sad and stressed out to figure out how to fix it. And then I
Mhm.
started slowly figuring out how, and then I started to think, how many other people are in the same situation? Um,
It's a
so
really
yeah.
big it's a really big problem, and I don't mean big as in I don't mean big as in, acute. I mean big as in, like, it's just a big problem. And I was talking to my friend Mendy about, his consulting, job where he's doing, like, implementations and stuff, with automations, and it's really complex. But he specifically had a customer come to him, and he asked for, one thing to be solved. And Mendy's like,
Mhm.
"Okay, yeah, I think with these different structures or whatever, I could do X, Y, or Z in this software language." And then the customer then said, "Okay, now I actually would like to do these three things with that." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I could do blah blah blah, and then tie those together." And then at the end of it, Mindy was like, "This is a huge problem that we just solved,
Mhm.
like a huge, big, multifaceted thing. If he had come
Mhm.
to me with what the end product was and said he wanted
Mhm.
this end product thing, I would have told him it wasn't possible. I
Yeah.
would have said that's not possible. I would have turned him away. But and not that this guy was necessarily foresight, had enough foresight to kind
Yeah.
of know that that end thing was what he wanted, but actually doing the small parts of it,
Mhm.
breaking down the big problem
Chunking
into
it out.
small chunks,
Yeah.
allowed them to use their brains in ways that they were able to kind of
Mhm.
pull everything together. And
Yes.
so I think that that's ultimately, I want to get back into the IT service provider space. I want to get back
Yeah.
into the space of solving these problems, because oftentimes we look at this big, big, big problem of the world.
Yeah.
And we're like, it's too big. I can't do it.
It's
No one
paralyzing.
believes, yeah, it's paralyzing. No one believes the same things as me. No one agrees with me. No one
Mhm.
has the same drive that I have or whatever, instead of what is the thing that I can solve right now, right
Yes.
here, today? What's the
Yes.
next yes that I can say? And then finding other people who are doing the yeses and then figuring out
Mhm.
what that can do.
Yes, and
It's
I
just
think
instead we just doom scroll.
yeah, well, and then for both of us going through, like, ADHD diagnosis and stuff like that, it's you start to realize, okay, this is actually familiar to me. There's executive dysfunction on a societal scale when it comes to
Yes.
democracy, which is that
Yes.
it's so big, people don't know how to break it down into approachable chunks that they can, and I have had to do that in my own life just to do the damn dishes or whatever. But it's like a big problem can be broken down into smaller chunks. And at the end of the day, if you do like 2 to 3 smaller chunks, you're further along than if you were just sitting there in paralysis. And it's like some of the smaller chunks can be, and that's the other thing, is especially with government on the level that people can easily get involved in. And you know this, especially because you are working in local government right now. It's like the people working in local government and also like volunteering on a local government level tend to be older people. They aren't media savvy. The ways that how did they get involved? They probably could barely tell you because they've been doing it for 30 years already. They're
Right.
retirees sometimes that
Mhm.
don't have a job to go to, so they don't
Mhm.
care if stuff is happening during times that normal people have jobs. Like there's layers of levels of ways that this is not accessible to people. But we all, and this is actually a line from Final Fantasy 14, but it's like, no, we all have a stake in this world. Like we all live in this world, we have a stake in it. Um, and by dint of that alone, democracy is the only like political structure I want to live in. But
Mm.
I want to work, which I
Right.
would say most people feel like disenchanted with it right now.
Absolutely. I mean, people feel disenchanted, and it is like you said, with good reason.
Mhm.
If you take a small issue of the executive dysfunction people experience running their household, not being able to do
Mhm.
laundry or whatever, and you expand that to their job, and you have the executive dysfunction not only of people doing their individual jobs, but the bureaucratic outlining of what's appropriate or proper, and then the balancing of needing, like we started this conversation with, like, how are we allowed to talk? What if we say something stupid? And you expand that.
Mhm.
For example, we do rely heavily on volunteers, and
Mhm.
uh, I, you know me, I am not one to shy away from hard conversations. I will
Mhm.
have them when it's necessary. I was talking in a postmortem meeting, and I was the one that said, "Hey, I think that." This person wasn't a good candidate for that position. I think that
Right.
their skill set didn't align with what we needed to have done, and we really need to consider who does that for our next times that we do this event.
Mhm.
And someone across the table at that point said, "I agree. I watched that, and I tried to help in the moment, and they wouldn't take my help, and and that's what that moment really ties back to what we're talking about,
Right.
because you don't even have to do something, but if something is wrong, you need to say something. And why
Mhm.
did I have to be the one that said something when that person agreed, and then everyone else around the table nodded their heads and said, "Yeah, I saw it too."
Yeah.
If you saw it, why didn't you
Take
have the
responsibility.
guts and take the
Mhm.
responsibility and say, "This is my project as well."
Mhm.
And it's because we're so often concerned about being polite,
Mhm.
we aren't. And it's I want to be I want to be clear. It's not that I think that people aren't good at things. And I think I am being clear. Like, it's not that I don't think people have a place or whatever, but there are certain jobs that are good for certain people, and then there's certain jobs
Mhm.
that are not.
Yeah.
And it's really important to have the ability to see through things and to
Yes.
practice saying, "This doesn't seem like it's a good fit. How can I help? How can I
Yes.
make it different?" Because that's often what is missing in those conversations, is
People will
not
be more
just
satisfied. If you help them
Yes.
out with getting connected to the thing that actually fits better for them, rather than
Yes.
forcing them into the thing that doesn't fit well for them and then
Mhm.
berating them when they don't live up to it.
Yes, because I mean, people ultimately I I choose to believe that people want to do a good job.
Yes.
They wanna go in to their world, to their community, to their place of
Yes.
employment. They want to be a hero.
They
They
wanna
want their
contribute,
lives
yeah.
to matter. They wanna
Mhm.
contribute in ways that matter. And so if you are giving them, it's that quote, "You wouldn't judge a fish by how it flies."
Mhm.
Like, people ultimately want to go in, do the thing, get paid what they are worth, be able
Mhm.
to go home and take care of their family. Like, they ultimately want to be good creatures.
Yes. Yeah,
They
'cause
ultimately want
mhm.
desperately for what they do in this world to matter. And so, why are we not doing everything we can in the moments that we can
Mhm.
to give them those pathways forward?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that that was also another aspect of Good Creatures that I I think both of us were into at the beginning is that it's very humanist in the sense that you're being realistic about what a human is, that what a human creature is and wants and
Mhm.
craves, and trying to support rather than say it's bad that you want this, right? And you just need to accept how the circumstances are. Try to connect the need with the ability to change and to do that in a targeted way because people we grew up as creatures in small societies where we were contributing and we knew each other and we felt like the things that we did had value and meaning. And now we're in this culture that's so alienated from things that obviously make sense. We're not hunter gatherers or whatever, but we still need to feel like we're contributing to the small groups of people that we interact with every day on such a deep level that telling somebody shut up and push a button is not going to cut it because it's so deep. It's so ingrained that you got to feel like you have efficacy, you have agency, you're able to make some kind of change in your world. We need that, like,
Right.
desperately.
Right. It
Saying
takes
what we don't is delusional, and saying that people can get through life in a happy, satisfied way without that is also, I think, on some level delusional.
um the the first time I heard Gabor Mate speak, it was on a podcast called, I think Last Day, which
Mhm,
was, didn't we talk about this? It's about people who were experiencing addiction in their last day before they passed away from overdosing on heroin.
mhm,
Um, so in that, my first experience with him was he was a guest on that show, and he said, uh, if you look at these people and their coping mechanism, which is drugs, what if you looked at it in the light of, instead of it being bad, what if you looked
mhm.
at it in the light of what is this coping mechanism giving them?
Yes, mhm,
Um, and that's something that I really consider because, yeah, if you look at the ways that we cope in this world when we're not feeling fulfilled, to tie this back to, people need work that makes them feel meaningful. They need to feel like they're contributing when
mhm,
they don't feel like they have a place in this world, or when things are particularly heavy and they don't know how to cope because they don't have the skills for it.
mhm,
What do they turn to help solve that?
mhm,
And can we start practicing identifying the things that, why we are turning to those things? Me personally, I have a palatable, when they talked about this in that podcast that day, I have a palatable addiction.
mhm,
I have one that's socially acceptable, and that's
mhm,
workaholism.
mhm.
like
Yes,
like I feel alive when I am up at 5 in the morning working when everyone else is sleeping.
mhm,
I feel good when I have completed certain tasks, and that that makes that part of my brain feel sated.
yeah,
And so it's really important that I identify where where I get my dopamine fix, where I get my
mhm,
sense of value, where I get my sense of purpose, and
mhm,
understand that other people may not get them the same way. But how can we better
mhm.
um, help people find that sated feeling
Mhm.
in what we're doing. I just that's a big question that I have
Yeah.
because we don't take the time. We don't take the
Mhm.
time. We don't allow the time. We don't allow the energy because
Mhm.
we're exhausted at the end of every day because we're pushing buttons instead of
Right.
letting our brains do the creative monkey work that
Yes. That's
we
something
evolved to
that
do.
I kind of harp on as a manager. Weird to think
Mm.
of myself as that. It feels icky. But, is that sometimes you have to slow down to go fast. That's
Can you say that
something
one more time?
sometimes you have to slow down to go fast.
Yes.
And so that that is something that in our culture and automation's not going to do it because it's
Mm-mm.
inefficient, right?
Mm.
That's something a human has to do because a human has to sit down and puzzle over the pieces. And
Mhm.
that is on its face inefficient task. But if you slow down and you go forward with a strategy, then you can be a lot better off, right? And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes, and let's loop this back into good creatures and politics, right? It feels like when you're just scrolling and you're taking in all the information, you're like, I'm going fast, right? I'm, and
You can only
like,
do one speed. There's
and
so
yeah,
much to
you're
consume. You
like,
have to go
okay, I
fast.
have to keep up with everything that's
Right.
going on. I have to keep
Mhm.
up with it. But if you slow down and you're like, I feel like this is making me sick. And I also feel like it's accomplishing nothing, just posting and scrolling and posting and scrolling. How can I do how can I do what's important to me in a way that is efficacious, in a way that makes change in the world? Um, Even if it doesn't look as fast on the exterior, right?
Mm.
And so that's something that I think more people need because I man, I get how upset people are about Israel and Palestine. That it's bad, right? But um posting is not gonna do it, right?
Mm. Right.
Um,
Right.
and let's say, like, depending on what your goals are, like what your ideal outcome is for the Israel Palestine conflict, right? So, like, if I'm taking my own politics, my own desires for an end state out of it, and I'm looking at like people operating in democracy, right? I'm an American, so it's like if I'm in an American democracy, which is one of the major allies of Israel, one of global leaders in international politics, right? Then what I do politically does matter, but is posting the most politically efficacious behavior that I could have? Probably not, right?
Right. And I think that we social media, these many to many
Mhm.
connectors, I think that uh we misconstrue the emotional energy it takes
Mhm.
with the effort needed. Like
Mhm.
we feel that because we felt this thing big and heavy and we spent
Mhm.
this amount of time writing a post and we got
Yes.
this many likes that there's some little calculation, there's some girl math, right?
Yeah,
About like
yeah, yeah.
how this was actually a good use of my time because
Yeah.
now people know where I stand and now
Mhm.
people know that I'm an ally and we miss the mark on investing that time and skill and energy
Mhm.
uh, because we feel like it was worth it.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's like when you step back at who's the decision makers, right? And like who I'm just using Israel Palestine as an example because it's very high profile right now, right? If you step back and look at like who's interacting with that problem like directly and what ability do you have to change who those people are, right? Like whether they're senators or congressmen, like well, you know, it, it's not to say that posting on social media is always pointless, but if you did that in a more targeted fashion, where you said, this representative who represents me, I do not like how they interact with this problem. I'm going to volunteer with their campaign as a social media person, right? Or something of that nature. I'm
Mhm.
going to amplify specifically, I'm going to organize like groups of people in my neighborhood that are going to go to, even if we can't unelect this person anytime soon, go to a town hall meeting with them, call their office. Like, you can do these things, and then with all the excess energy that you've been doing on posting 24/7, you can sleep and,
Yes.
um, and, like, have a cup of tea and tend to your mental health and your well-being and your, right? Like, instead of just being burned out all the time, you
Right.
can do a little thing that is gonna make a more tangible change in a more boring way, and then you can rest, or you can find a second additional thing to do that is going to be more efficacious. But I honestly, no, nobody looks at my posts.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean,
I
other
talk
than
too
people
much.
who
Yeah.
already agree with me,
Right.
nobody's looking at that
Exactly.
shit. Like,
Well, I think this brings up 2 other thoughts that I have about, action or public events or whatever. The first one is the duality of nature,
mm,
of humanity, that, you can have deep pain at the same time as you can have deep joy.
yeah,
I think that often we flatten things out on social media, that you are a
mm,
personification of an ideal
mm,
instead of being this messy accumulation of humanity, which is you
I'm
can
Sophie.
you sorry?
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
sorry,
Sophie,
Sophie. Just
I know Sophie has something important to say. So you can be grieving lives lost in Palestine, and you can be
hmm
grieving lives lost in Israel, and you can
yeah,
also celebrate Christmas.
hmm yeah,
That you don't have to not celebrate Christmas or Kwanzaa or Hanukkah or whatever your holiday of choice is,
hmm
because you are, struggling or angry about the situation in the
hmm
world, apart from you. And so I think that was something that I saw a lot of, where
hmm
people were like, "How dare you go to a Christmas party?"
yeah. How dare you be happy?
Yeah, "How dare you do this when there's people struggling?" And to be fair, I think Emmett Till's mom actually was notorious for having said this, that she was living in New York,
Mhm,
or something like that. She was living in a metropolitan area, and she had considered that lynching and all of that was a thing for other people, not like if it was a short amount of time prior to
mhm,
losing her child, where she was like, that's a problem for these backwards areas, not mine.
mm,
So if one thing impacts one of us, it impacts all of us.
yeah,
So I think that's the first part, is like, you have to living in community, you have to
mhm,
hold both things. You have to hold the
yes,
ability, the range of human
yeah,
experience. The
and being
second
a
thing
human,
was,
you have to.
right,
Mm,
right. You can't, like, social media, these many to many ideas where you have to distill yourself down into a personality. You
mm,
you lose that.
yeah,
Um, and the second thing is like, not all 5 minutes are equal.
mhm,
Not
yep,
all hour I don't know how I wanna say this, but, like, not all hours are equal. 5 minutes putting away my dishes is not the same as 5 minutes finding a video on YouTube.
mhm,
And I think we often forget, we have a very poor understanding of our sense of time and the effort, and it's really important for us to identify where our strengths are and where
mhm,
we can most be slicing through and being who we need to be in this world,
yes,
versus trying to follow someone else's mold.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah, yeah, and I think, like, for me, going back to, like, who we need to be in this world, to me, that means self-determination, right?
mm,
It's not gonna be the same for everybody, but I don't think it's a stretch to say a lot of people, um, are looking for purpose and not necessarily realizing that that's something you give to yourself in alignment with your values. And you
I
have to
love
decide
that.
what your values are. and then you have
Yeah.
to decide what your purpose is.
Yeah,
And then
so we're not yeah, a sword there's not gonna be a sword in the stone for each of us. There's not
yeah.
gonna be, some mystic monk on the top of a hill waiting for us to come,
Yes.
and for him to say, "You have been chosen, we were waiting for
Mhm.
you." Like, that's not gonna happen, you have to create that for yourself.
Yes, and
Um
another thing I wanted to say about, the idea of purpose, but also, like, therapy culture and being a human, right? And holding the good times and the bad times together. There's
Mhm.
so much these coaches and therapists and things that are trying to build their brand, right, on social media will say you just need to work on your healing and then you'll heal the world, right? Or
Mhm.
you just need to follow this process and you will become healed, and then it's like you'll become this super person that is beyond the pain and suffering, so you could be like a bodhisattva and you can reach down and heal the masses. But I've been working on my mental health for like 10 years, and I still for 2 days wanted to lay down and eat cheese. Like, it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
And the best I could do in that situation is get up and make it thank you. The best I could do in that situation is get up and make a podcast with you, even though it's what I said I was gonna do. We did it, and I'm
we
happy
did
that
it.
we did, right?
Right.
And then also, eat. I had orange and I
Yeah.
it was like
Vitamin C, little
right,
fiber. Yeah,
but
yeah.
all of that to say that I I think I got to the point recently. I think it was kind of the 10-year mark of therapy and
Mm.
medication and trying to get healed. And also I was a deeply spiritual person for my
Mhm.
whole life. I still am.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
getting to this point that I am accepting I'm never gonna be
Yeah.
healed, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
but I need to show up and do things anyways. I don't need to wait till I'm fully healed to say, here's my book about how I'm doing life and what my thoughts are on it, right?
Right.
Because I mean, God knows Ben Shapiro's not waiting. What's the
You're right. You're right. You
Andrew
s
Tate's not
no,
waiting. Well, it all comes back to Andrew Tate. He's just the worst person I could think of. But like,
today.
and
Yeah.
that's not to say that it's I don't know.
No, I mean, don't say I don't know. No,
But
because
you know
because
what I'm
because here's the thing.
saying?
Yeah, as you were talking about this, I do
Yeah.
know what you're saying because as you were talking about this, I was reminded of the conversation. I actually used this to talk to a younger colleague at work recently. You had said that you think that one of your leadership philosophies
Mhm.
is that, and I'm gonna misquote you, so feel free to correct me after this.
I'm ready.
That that one of your philosophies when leading other people is that the pain of human suffering is universal, but
Mhm.
our gifts are unique. And
Yes.
so,
You
okay,
nailed it.
did I nail it?
Man, I sounded so smart just then.
So, and I think that I think that's really important because so often we think that
Mhm.
our hurting is unique and our
Mhm.
gifts are universal.
Mhm.
And when you do it like that, that freezes you. That
Mhm.
freezes you, right? Like that.
Mhm.
If you think that your pain is unique and no one else could possibly ever experience it, and that you are the
Mhm.
worst of the worst, or you are alone in this experience, that isolates you that
Yes.
isolates you. You don't know what to do with
Mhm.
that. And then if you think, oh well, how I experience the world or what I have to say doesn't matter, you end up in situations like I was saying earlier, where I was like, okay, we need to solve this problem, and everyone's like, yeah, 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 we need to solve that problem. I saw that too, and it's like, no, you need to reach in
Yeah.
and consider that the things that give you the deepest hurts are what feed your creative process to be able to heal your own self and the world around you as you do the work.
Yes.
Um, that yeah, it's one of the things when I've had issues with my shoulders and stuff, and one of the things the physical therapists say is motion is lotion. So
Mm.
often when we're injured, we're like, oh, I can't do anything, I'm injured.
Yeah.
When really what you need to be doing is, like for shoulder issues, you want to take in deep belly breaths that stretch your rib cage and your shoulders out. You want to move and do stretches within reason that you're,
Mhm.
like you can't heal where you were hurt. You have to expand past that.
Right. And I
Um,
think also a good metaphor I think for this is sometimes the poems I write that people respond the most to are the most specific, right? Of like a an experience that I had. And like they are the most concrete, only a thing that I could have lived type thing, right?
mm,
But then I
mhm.
share it with somebody and they're like, I felt like that.
Right,
And
right.
that's where the the like that's where that paradox comes in, right?
Mm,
It's like, okay, this is an incredibly specific situation, but what I was doing in that situation is me as a unique person was puzzling over how to be a person,
yes,
right? And we
right.
are all doing that. And that's the part that is universal. But the effort that each individual puts in is unique.
Mhm.
But I think that we could crowdsource this by more
Yeah,
people being willing to talk about and puzzle over and share what they're trying
yeah.
rather than thinking that there's just some guru out there that's going to say this is the one way. No, there are 8 billion ways of
Mm.
trying, and I'm
E
interested to hear what other people's are.
right, I wanna know. I well, like, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk,
Mhm,
one of my favorite little pieces that he did was "One Buddha is not enough,"
mhm.
and I love that. I think about that often. It's the screen on my background, on rotate. One Buddha is not enough. It's not
That's
enough for there
true.
to be one person who tells you how to live. It's not enough for there to be one person in each community. Like, we need communities of people who are questioning the status quo, uh, bringing their gifts to the table, asking questions, and making what we're going
Yeah.
to live in tomorrow.
That's what I always, because as you know, I love cults. I mean, I hate cults, they're bad, but I love
Yes,
researching them.
cults, bad.
And
Yeah.
one thing that always kills me about these intense, high control religious movements is that the product is the followers.
Mhm,
They
mhm.
are so often these sweet, generous spirited persons that are so open minded, so helpful, so engaged. And the problem is that there's an abusive person that is exploiting that very nature that they have to their own ends.
Mhm.
But it's like if these organizations had been more democratic, more of a flat structure, right? Less authoritarian, you would have had the benefit of the wisdom of all of these people. Like the Twin Flames documentaries. Oh my gosh. All these people that were victimized by this crappy Jeff are
Crappy Jeff.
so sweet. They're so thoughtful, right?
Mhm.
There are, and the thing about cults too is like so often the victim ends up becoming the perpetrator.
Yes.
And then they feel like bad, right, about
Right.
being a part of it. But
Vulnerable to them. That's
cults gravitate toward these people that are
mhm.
just open and willing, and it's like they weaponize that.
Yeah, they're people who sincerely want to see something good in the world, and
Mhm.
they met the wrong person at their most vulnerable point.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
think about that a lot. I mean, that's the thing that probably puts me at odds with a lot of people who are maybe politically aligned as I am, is that when I see extremist movements and I see the people in them, right? I see people who are very generous
Mhm.
when most soup kitchens are probably run by right wingers.
Yeah. Right.
Like, that's facts because they're run a lot of times by churches, a lot of times evangelical churches.
Yeah.
And these are people who, whatever their beliefs are, they are showing up, they're donating their free time, their resources, their effort, their heart to these people.
Yes.
Their reasons why, right? They stem from a lot of times, like, they feel like deeply they are bad,
Yeah.
and they have found a religious movement that soothes that.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I can't see them as my, like, enemies, right? I see them as trying, just like
Exactly.
I am. And so that's where, again, Good Creatures comes in, is it's like, I don't want it to be a partisan thing, right? Because I wanted it to be something that's like, can we all just step back and recognize the work that we each are doing, and also to try and find ways that are more collaborative, right, to do that work, rather than adversarial. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
no, I want to every room that I go in, it's not that I wanna have friends, it's that I want to help people become the best thing that they can be, the best version of who they are.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt when we meet someone who has certain beliefs. I think it's really easy to other someone, and
Mhm.
we're talking about growing up in small communities where your work
Yeah.
matters. We're taught to other things. No, not taught. Our lizard brain says other is bad because we're pattern forming and seeking people,
Yeah.
yeah, creatures. But like it's so important. And I try to come into every conversation when something makes me uncomfortable, I ask why.
Right.
Okay, so this person said that they are X, and
Mhm.
that made me have an ick. Why?
Mhm.
I have to be honest with the ick, and I have to be open to having conversations with them. And I'm sure one of the things we'll talk about later is like sphere of influence,
Mhm.
and stuff like that, and how it's really important to not be in 100% agreement with the people in your lives because that's
Yeah.
cult behavior.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but I think it's really really important to practice that instead of
Mhm.
othering people, to bring people in and to ask why and to encourage that type of behavior,
Right.
because that's the only way that we'll find a path forward, is that duality, that the paradox of having two different, a plus and a minus
Mhm.
node on a battery. You can't have a battery with just one.
Mhm.
It doesn't work like that. You have to have those equal parts moving. And so,
Yeah.
um,
And I think also for me, like, especially, I think why social work has been such a good fit for me, like, as a theoretical framework, is that if I, as someone in a healing profession, right, come to a person that, like, someone comes to me for help, and I have an idea that healed looks like this, and I try to force them toward that goalpost,
mm,
I'm in a way doing I'm crushing something that could otherwise be there, which is that
mm,
person's self-determination, what their dream of themselves are, right? Like,
mm,
what
mhm,
they hope to be. And
mhm,
so the idea with social work is that it should be client directed, right? That you have an individual who is experiencing what they see in their own life as problems, right? What do they think the problems are? What does a good life look like to them? And then what resources do they have in themselves, in the environment they live in the relationships they have, or what could they have? And how can you connect all of these things to help this person live the life that they want?
mm. Yeah.
Not, we're going to get you through my 5-step $99 a month coaching process to the ultimate healed person who will then heal the world.
Mm.
Who doesn't want to heal the world? Who doesn't want to live in this shit? We
Right?
all do. That's a very tempting sales pitch. But like, that's not how it is. And
That's
also, trying to get that
right.
is how violence happens. That's actually the Karl Popper has an article, like, utopian violence, and
Mm,
it's like, if people think that they're working for something ultimately better than what is, that is the, like, nobody thinks that they're doing bad things for a bad reason. They're doing bad things for a good reason, right?
mhm.
To in their minds.
Right, right.
And I think that's just very, very key. Um, is that realizing that every individual, I think, deep down wants to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I
that's That's how I feel about it,
That's
you know?
yeah, every
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 creature
human
good,
deep down
actually. Creature
wants
good, actually.
creature actually, that's a shirt idea for our shop. Um,
We
and I
have to
mean
monetize it because 'cause we're millennials, so
yeah.
we gotta.
Well, and I think it does go back to the big problem idea that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Where we want someone to say that they can own the big problem, that they know
Mhm,
the answer to the big problem instead of and so we then abdicate
mhm,
our responsibility in the situation because we're like,
mhm.
oh well, someone else knows the big problem, and if
Yeah.
I'm not if I'm not getting the results that I want out of my life so that I look like this person,
Mhm.
then it's something that I did wrong in my list of things instead of solving the little parts of our own
Yes.
little problems and
And
letting
getting
them come
help.
together.
And, like, getting help to do that. You find other people around you, you say, "Hey, I think this is a step forward we could take together.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in helping me make this step forward together?" Right?
Yeah.
Right, and, like, getting that kind of, buy-in from the people who are gonna be impacted by
Mm,
the movement forward,
mm.
which I think is something that progressive movements, when they are just online, totally abdicate, which
Yeah.
is that you do need to get buy-in from the people who will be impacted by your policy change.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think that's a not doable thing. I just think
Just
it's something that people don't know. I don't know how to do, right,
yeah.
necessarily, but I know that what we're doing is not working.
What we're doing is not working, so let's do something else, and let's
Yeah,
talk about what those other things that we can do are.
might be, yeah.
Might be. Yeah, might be. We'll just try it. We'll just try it.
Let's just
It's
try
all a
things.
big experience
Yeah. Well,
Um
I think this is
So
good.
I think it is good. I was gonna say, we've been on here for an hour. I feel
Mhm.
like what we should probably say real quick, we've kind of danced around or we've hit a couple
Oh, yeah.
different times what we want good creatures to be or what we kind of want these Sunday mornings to be. I was
Mhm.
wondering if maybe you would word salad a little bit
Okay.
on what you would like for this
Yeah,
to be,
the podcast.
or like what that maybe even if it was just like what would your three goals or what would
Yeah.
a goal be for this?
I think that my 3 goals, if I had to have 3 goals for this podcast and for good creatures in general,
This is such a
um
big sister thing for me to be. All right, I want you to come up with three goals.
well, it helps me. I knew that you would do this, which is why I rolled up in my pajamas and you rolled up having been awake for 5 hours. So, um this is why we work.
So good.
um but if I had 3 kind of, I don't know, it might not be 3. I'm just going to riff.
Yeah.
I would like for this podcast to be a way that connects people to ideas that feel like they can breathe a little better as far as how achievable a better world is, right? I want it to be something that connects people to a feeling of agency and to a feeling of, oh, here's somewhere I could get plugged in,
Mm,
or here's something I could do on my own. Um, I want this to be a podcast that helps people just have a crumb of the audacity that some of the worst people on the planet have. Right? And I know
mhm,
that it seems, like, okay, it's called Good Creatures, but, like, listen, I do not like Andrew Tate. Have some of his audacity because he sure as hell does, okay?
mhm,
Like,
yes.
you're a better person than him. And I need to have some of that audacity
Mm,
because I don't, and then it paralyzes me, right? And
mhm,
I'm not saying I want to be like Andrew Tate, but I am saying that maybe someone wants to hear what I am thinking about, and I would like to hear what you're thinking about.
mm,
And I want people to think, okay, maybe what I'm thinking is valuable in some way, and to run with that, and to be creative, and to think through puzzles themselves. And then I think finally, the biggest thing for me is I want people to be able to identify when their time, attention, and abilities are being exploited. I
mm,
don't know how to do that necessarily, but I see so often, and this especially occurred to me when I was watching the Twin Flames documentary, is that people are alienated by
mm,
the establishment. And so in that void, they end up being drawn into things that are exploiting them. And I want people to be able to notice and point out and avoid those things that are going to leech their ability and their leech what's good about them into things that are not going to get us anywhere, as a
I
society.
I love that, and I also love that I heard you say you want good creatures to be about giving people agency, audacity, and awareness,
Yes.
and that's
Wow, that's a
fucking
sound
cool.
bite.
I love it.